The gallery lighting was wrong. Elena Marsh adjusted her camera settings for the third time, watching the champagne flutes catch the overhead spots in ways that would blow out her exposures. The Metropolitan Arts Foundation Gala was exactly the kind of event that paid well enough to keep her studio apartment for another month, but the technical challenges always made her earn it. She moved along the perimeter, invisible in her black dress and flats, the uniform of someone paid to observe, not participate. Through her viewfinder, Manhattan's elite became a study in contrasts, genuine laughter beside practiced smiles, boredom masked as sophistication, desire disguised as networking. The Castellane just arrived. Elena glanced at Marcus, the foundation's development director, who'd gone pale beneath his tuxedo. She'd photographed enough of these events to recognize that particular shade of anxiety. Should I know who that is? She kept her camera raised, catching a candid of a silver-haired philanthropist who'd had too much wine. Dominic Castellane. Private equity. He bought out Meridian Hotels last year. Gutted the executive team, flipped it for $1 billion profit. Marcus loosened his bow tie. He donated $500,000 to get on the guest list tonight. We have no idea why. Elena found herself scanning the crowd with renewed interest. She'd read about Castellane, or rather, she'd read the business headlines that portrayed him as a corporate executioner with a talent for identifying weakness and exploiting it. Not exactly the warm, fuzzy philanthropist type. There. She followed Marcus's gaze to the entrance. Her finger found the shutter release on instinct, capturing the moment before she consciously registered what she was seeing. Dominic Castellane moved through the crowd like a knife through silk, no resistance, just clean separation. He was younger than she expected, maybe late 30s, with dark hair that looked professionally disheveled and a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that seemed to calculate the room's net worth in a glance. But it was his isolation that struck her. 2 steps behind him, a woman in a severe suit, murmured into her phone. Security, probably. Everyone else gave him space, even as they watched him. Especially as they watched him. Through her lens, she saw what the naked eye might miss. The tension in his shoulders, the way his hands remained at his sides instead of in his pockets, a man in perfect control who expected attack from any angle. Click, click, click. Miss Marsh. Elena lowered her camera to find a wall of tailored suit blocking her view. Not Castellane, this man was shorter, broader, with the bearing of someone used to clearing paths. Mr. Castellane would like a word. It wasn't a question. Her stomach dropped. In 5 years of event photography, she'd learned that when wealthy men noticed you, it was rarely good news. Usually they wanted photos, deleted images that caught them with the wrong person or the wrong expression. I'm working, she said, keeping her voice level. If there's an issue with the photos, the foundation has my contact. Now, please. The please was decorative. Elena glanced at Marcus, who'd developed a sudden fascination with his shoes, then followed the suit toward a quieter corner of the gallery. Dominic Castellane stood before a Rothko, though he wasn't looking at it. His attention was fixed on a phone screen, his thumb scrolling with practiced efficiency. He didn't look up as she approached. You're the photographer. Statement, not question. Elena Marsh. Yes. You've been photographing me for the last 7 minutes. He pocketed his phone, finally meeting her eyes. They were dark gray, almost black in the gallery lighting. Cold. Assessing. Why? You entered a room full of people who paid $1,000 a plate to be photographed. She kept her camera at her side, resisting the instinct to check her settings, a nervous tell she'd worked hard to eliminate. It's literally my job. You're not photographing me the way you photograph them. He gestured vaguely at the crowd. You're hunting, looking for something. Elena felt her pulse quicken. He was right, and she didn't like that he'd noticed. You have an interesting face. Good bone structure. The light catches. Don't. The single word cut through her explanation. I didn't hire experts to teach me when people are lying. You were analyzing me. She should apologize. She should defer. She'd learned early that men with money expected both. But something about his absolute certainty irritated her. Fine. Yes. You move through this room like you're expecting someone to take a shot at you. Everyone else is here to see and be seen. You're here for a reason, and I was trying to figure out what it is. She lifted her chin. Satisfied? For 3 seconds, he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. Very. He withdrew a business card from his jacket, holding it between 2 fingers. I need a photographer for tomorrow night. Private event. 5 hours, flat rate of $50,000. The number hit her like a physical blow. $50,000. That was 6 months of rent. A year of insurance. A new camera body to replace her aging equipment. What's the catch? The words escaped before she could stop them. Smart. He set the card on the edge of a marble pedestal beside her. The catch is that you won't be working. You'll be attending. As my date. Elena stared at him. I don't. I need someone who doesn't belong to my world. Someone authentic. Someone who won't perform. His voice remained level, but something flickered behind his eyes, something that looked almost like desperation before it vanished. I need real. Tomorrow night, I need you to pretend we're together. Laugh at my jokes. Touch my arm. Look at me like I'm not what everyone says I am. Why? She couldn't process fast enough. This didn't make sense. Men like him had hundreds of options, women who belonged at whatever glittering event required a date. Because I'm about to acquire a company run by someone who believes corporate raiders lack humanity. He won't sell to me. But he might sell to us. Dominic's jaw tightened. To a man who clearly has something to live for beyond the next deal. So I'm a prop. A redemption story in heels. You're a businesswoman being offered a substantial fee for one evening's work. He glanced at his watch, understated, probably cost more than her car. 5 hours. Dinner, conversation, and the appearance of genuine affection. Then you never see me again. $50,000. $50,000 to pretend for one night. Elena's mind raced through the calculations she'd been avoiding. The overdue electric bill. The lens she needed but couldn't afford. The slow starvation of her savings account. She'd been one bad month away from giving up on photography and getting a corporate job with benefits and soul-crushing fluorescent lighting. There's one rule, Dominic said quietly. His expression had shifted, becoming something harder to read. Tomorrow night, we're meeting the Hartwell family, James Hartwell and his daughter, Catherine. 3 years ago, Catherine Hartwell was engaged to me. Elena's breath caught. She knew that name, everyone knew that name. She died, she whispered. Car accident. I remember, it was all over the news. Yes. The single syllable carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. 18 months after her death, I orchestrated a hostile takeover of Hartwell Industries. Her father lost his company, his legacy, everything he'd built. He believes I did it out of spite. Out of cruelty. Did you? That's not relevant to tomorrow night. His eyes held hers, and she saw something there that made her chest tighten, not coldness, but its opposite. The rigid control of someone who'd buried something deep and refused to let it surface. The rule is this: you will not acknowledge knowing about Catherine. You will not ask questions. You will not express sympathy or curiosity. As far as tomorrow night is concerned, my past is a blank page. Can you do that? Every instinct screamed at her to say no. This wasn't just a fake date, it was participating in something she didn't understand, something that involved grief and guilt and business vengeance. She'd be complicit in a deception that touched on death itself. But $50,000. Why me? She asked again. Really? Dominic stepped closer. And she caught the scent of his cologne, cedar and something darker, more complex. Because in 7 minutes of observation, you saw through me. Most people can't see past the reputation. You looked for the truth underneath. His voice dropped. That's what I need tomorrow. Someone who knows how to see. Someone who won't be fooled by the performance. But you want me to give a performance. I want you to be honest within a lie. He reached past her, tapping the business card on the pedestal. My assistant's number. Decision by midnight tonight. The car will pick you up at 6 tomorrow evening. Everything you need will be provided. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Marsh, you have good instincts. Whatever you saw in those 7 minutes of photographs, you weren't wrong. 8. Then he was gone, absorbed back into the crowd with the same fluid ease he'd used to navigate it initially. Elena stood frozen, staring at the business card with its embossed lettering. Her hands had gone cold despite the gallery's perfect climate control. She thought about grief and guilt, about desperate men and dangerous bargains. About the photographer's distance, she'd always maintained observing without participating, seeing without being seen. And she thought about $50,000, and whether her soul came cheaper than she'd always believed. The black car arrived at 5:47 p.m., 13 minutes early. Elena watched from her fourth-floor window as the driver, not Dominic, never Dominic, she reminded herself, stepped out and checked his phone. A Mercedes S-Class, probably this year's model, idling at a curb in her neighborhood where most vehicles qualified as runs occasionally. Her reflection in the window glass looked uncertain. She'd said yes. At 11:43 last night, after 3 hours of pacing her apartment and running calculations in her head, she'd called the assistant's number and said yes. Now, she was going to earn the easiest $50,000 of her life, or make the worst mistake imaginable. The intercom buzzed. Elena grabbed her small clutch, the only non-camera bag she owned that could pass for elegant, and headed downstairs. Her palms felt damp against the leather. "Miss Marsh." The driver nodded, opening the rear door. "Mr. Castellane is waiting at his residence. We'll be there in 20 minutes. His residence. She'd assumed they'd meet at the restaurant, the event, wherever this performance was taking place. Sitting in the leather-scented silence of the Mercedes, Elena tried not to think about what his residence meant. This was business. A transaction. She was working, nothing more. Manhattan flowed past the windows, her city transformed by the lens of wealth. The car headed uptown, into neighborhoods where doormen wore better suits than she owned. They pulled up in front of a building with an actual awning, actual marble, actual everything she'd only photographed from professional distance. The elevator required a key card. Of course it did. The driver escorted her to a private elevator that serviced only the penthouse. Because of course he lived in the penthouse. The doors opened directly into an apartment that redefined every assumption she'd made about living spaces. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The late afternoon sun turned the sky copper and gold, spilling across dark hardwood floors and furniture that looked simultaneously modern and timeless. Everything was clean lines and muted tones, grays, blacks, deep blues. Not cold, but controlled. Intentional. "Miss Marsh." "Good evening." The woman who greeted her wasn't Dominic. She was the same severe-suited assistant from last night, with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones. "I'm Victoria Chen, Mr. Castellane's chief of staff. He's finishing a call. Please, come with me." Elena followed her through the apartment, catching glimpses of a library with leather-bound books, a kitchen that looked more surgical than domestic, artwork that belonged in museums, no photographs, no personal touches. It felt less like a home than an expensive hotel where someone temporarily resided. Victoria led her to a bedroom, not the master suite, Elena noted with relief, where garment bags hung on the back of the door and a makeup artist was setting up her equipment on the dresser. "Mr. Castellane wasn't certain of your size," Victoria said, gesturing to the bags. "We have 3 options, all appropriate for tonight's venue. Hair and makeup will take approximately 90 minutes. The car leaves at 7:30. Elena touched the nearest garment bag. Through the plastic, she could see midnight blue fabric. "This seems excessive for..." The Hartwells are old money, they noticed details. Victoria's expression didn't change. "Everything must be perfect, or they'll know something's off. Mr. Castellane is investing significant resources in tonight. We don't take chances." "Right." Elena felt like she was being inducted into a very expensive military operation. "Where's he?" "Working. He'll brief you before departure." Victoria checked her phone. "Adrian will start with your hair. Try to relax." Relaxing seemed impossible, but Elena sat where directed and let the makeup artist take over. Adrian worked with efficient precision, asking questions about her skin type and sensitivities while transforming her reflection into something Elena barely recognized. The woman looking back from the mirror had smoky eyes and perfectly contoured cheekbones. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, fell in loose waves that looked artfully casual. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged. She looked like a lie. Perfect, Adrian announced, stepping back. Now let's try the dresses. The first was too formal black silk that would work for a state dinner. The second, emerald green, was stunning but felt wrong somehow. But the third? Elena stared at her reflection. The midnight blue dress had a fitted bodice and flowing skirt that moved like water. Simple enough to be elegant, expensive enough to be real. The neckline showed collarbones and the suggestion of shoulders without being revealing. She looked like someone who might actually date a man like Dominic Castellane. That one, Victoria said from the doorway. Elena hadn't heard her return. Good choice. Shoes are on the bed. He's ready to see you. Her heart kicked uncomfortably. Now? You have 15 minutes to discuss the parameters of the evening. Use them wisely. Elena slipped on the heels Italian leather, fit perfectly, and followed Victoria back through the apartment. They stopped outside what looked like a home office. Victoria knocked once, opened the door, and gestured, Elena inside. Dominic stood by another wall of windows, silhouetted against the darkening sky. He'd changed into a tuxedo that made him look even more dangerous than the business suit had. When he turned, Elena saw the same controlled expression from last night, but something else beneath it. Exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness he almost managed to hide. Good, he said, taking in her transformation with a single assessing glance. You clean up well. Thanks. I think. Elena clasped her hands to keep from fidgeting with the dress. Your assistant said you'd brief me? Sit. He gestured to a leather chair and remained standing, a power play, or maybe just habit. The Hartwells are hosting a private dinner at their estate in Greenwich. 8 people total. James Hartwell, his daughter Catherine's younger brother Michael, and 5 members of Hartwell's board of directors. And your plan is? To convince them I'm human. The words came out flat, factual. James Hartwell believes I'm incapable of emotional attachment. That everything I do is calculated for profit. He's not entirely wrong. But tonight, he needs to see something different. A man who's moved on. Who's found someone new. Yes. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We met 3 weeks ago at an art gallery. You're a photographer, that part's true. Easier to maintain consistency. We've been seeing each other casually. Nothing serious yet, but there's potential. I'm interested. You make me laugh. I make you roll your eyes at my terrible art opinions. Do you have terrible art opinions? I have no art opinions. I buy what appreciates in value. He crossed to a cabinet, poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Didn't offer her any. The key is subtlety. Don't oversell. The Hartwells are sophisticated. They'll spot theatrical performance. Small touches. Shared glances. The appearance of inside jokes. Make them believe we have a history that extends beyond tonight. Elena stood, needing to match his height somehow. And the rule? About not mentioning Catherine. His hand tightened on the glass. Catherine was. He stopped. Recalibrated. The Hartwells will be watching for any sign that I'm using you to replace her. Any indication that I'm haunted by guilt. If you acknowledge her existence, if you show sympathy or curiosity, it undermines everything. Because then it looks like you're still thinking about her. Because then it looks like I care. He drained the scotch in one swallow. James needs to see a man who's moved forward. Someone he can work with without drowning in the past. You're evidence of my capacity for normalcy. The words were cold, but Elena heard something beneath them, the careful construction of someone who'd practiced this speech. Rehearse the detachment. You still haven't told me why you destroyed his company, she said quietly. No. I haven't. Dominic set down the glass with precise care. And I won't. That's not part of our arrangement, but it affects how I play this. If I'm supposed to be falling for you, I need to understand. You need to understand that this is a role, nothing more. He moved closer, and she caught that cedar scent again. $50,000, Miss Marsh. You agreed to a job. I'm not hiring a therapist or a confessor. I'm hiring someone who can smile convincingly for 5 hours. The distance between them collapsed to inches. Elena felt her breath catch, hating herself for the reaction. He was right, this was business. But standing this close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Could see the careful way he held himself, like something inside was constantly at risk of breaking through. I can smile convincingly, she heard herself say. Can you? Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. Then it vanished behind the controlled mask. We're about to find out. He checked his watch. Car leaves in 8 minutes. Last chance to back out. Elena thought about her overdue bills. Her struggling business. The photograph she'd taken last night of a man moving through a crowd alone. Let's go pretend, she said. The Hartwell estate looked like something from a different century. Georgian architecture, perfectly manicured grounds, a circular drive where their Mercedes joined 2 other expensive vehicles. Elena felt the dress suddenly become armor, the only thing between her actual self and this world of inherited wealth. Dominic must have sensed her tension. His hand found hers as the driver opened their door. Breathe, he murmured. You belong here because you're with me. That's all that matters. His hand was warm, larger than hers, and the touch sent an unexpected current up her arm. Method acting, she told herself. Getting into character, they ascended the stone steps together. Before Dominic could knock, the door opened to reveal a man in his late 60s with silver hair, and the kind of presence that came from generations of certainty. James Hartwell. His eyes moved from Dominic to Elena, and she watched his expression shift, surprise, then calculation, then something harder to define. Castellane. The name carried weight. You brought a guest. James. This is Elena Marsh. Elena, James Hartwell. Dominic's voice remained neutral, giving nothing away. I hope you don't mind the addition. Elena and I had plans this evening, and I didn't want to cancel. She felt the subtext beneath the words. Look how normal I am. Making compromises for someone, changing plans. Being human. Not at all. James extended his hand, and Elena shook it, feeling the strength in his grip. Please, come in. Everyone's in the library. The interior matched the exterior. Old money, dressed in antiques and oil paintings of ancestors. Elena cataloged details, the way she would frame a photograph, the worn Persian rugs that cost more than most cars, the fresh flowers that someone had arranged with professional precision, the way James Hartwell moved through his own home like a king in a castle. The library held 5 people, all turning as they entered. Elena recognized the dynamic immediately. This wasn't a casual dinner. This was an audition. These board members were here to evaluate whether Dominic Castellane deserved a second chance. Everyone, this is Dominic Castellane and his companion, Elena Marsh. James's tone remained carefully neutral. Elena, please forgive the business setting. We have matters to discuss. Of course. Elena let Dominic guide her toward a sofa, accepting the glass of wine someone handed her. Don't mind me. I'm just here for the architecture. This house is stunning. A woman in her 50s, one of the board members, smiled slightly. Do you have an interest in historical homes? I'm a photographer. I'm interested in anything beautiful. Elena glanced at Dominic, letting a small smile touch her lips. Present company included. She felt him react, a barely perceptible shift in his posture. Then his hand found her knee, a casual touch that looked natural but felt electric. Elena photographs events and has been trying to educate me on art for 3 weeks now, Dominic said. It's a lost cause. 3 weeks? James Hartwell's attention sharpened. That's quite recent. We met at a gallery opening. She was working. I was pretending to understand abstract expressionism. Dominic's thumb moved absently against Elena's knee, just a small circle, barely noticeable. Except she noticed. God. Did she notice? She took pity on me and explained what I was looking at. It was the first honest conversation I'd had in months. The lie came out smoothly, seasoned with just enough vulnerability to sound true. Elena added her own thread to the fiction. He asked me to dinner. I said no. He asked again. I said no again. She met Dominic's eyes, putting warmth into her gaze. The 3rd time, he offered to let me photograph him for a personal project. That's when I knew he was serious. And did you? The question came from a younger man, Catherine's brother Michael. Elena realized with a cold shock. He had her eyes. Photograph him? Yes. though I'm still deciding if I captured anything real or just expensive suits." She let the words carry gentle teasing, watching Dominic's expression shift into something that might have been genuine amusement. "She's brutal with her critiques," he said. "It's refreshing." The conversation flowed into business talk, numbers, and projections Elena couldn't follow. But she watched the way James Hartwell studied them, looking for cracks in the performance. Looking for proof that this was exactly what it was, theater. Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 20. 8 of them clustered at one end of a mahogany table that probably dated to the Revolutionary War. Elena sat beside Dominic, hyper-aware of every movement. When he reached for his wine glass, she shifted slightly closer. When he spoke, she angled toward him. All the small unconscious adjustments of genuine intimacy. "Tell me, Miss Marsh," James said during the second course, "what do you think of Dominic's profession?" The question was a trap. Elena felt it in the suddenly attentive silence, the way every eye turned toward her. "I think," she said carefully, "that I don't understand it well enough to judge. I know what I read in headlines. I know his reputation, but," she glanced at Dominic, letting genuine complexity show in her expression. "People are more than their work. I'm trying to understand the whole person, not just the business card." "Noble." Michael Hartwell's voice carried an edge. "Though some business practices are difficult to separate from the person enacting them." Elena felt Dominic tense beside her. This was dangerous ground, approaching the territory they'd agreed to avoid. "Michael." James's single word was a warning. "No, it's a fair point." Dominic's voice remained level, but Elena heard the control required to maintain it. "My business methods are aggressive. I identify weakness and exploit it. That's not comfortable to witness or experience." He paused. "But it's also not the sum total of who I am." "Convenient timing," Michael continued. "Discovering that you're more than your worst actions. Just as my father is considering." "Michael, enough." James set down his fork with precision. "We're here to discuss the future. Not relitigate the past." But the past hung in the room like smoke. Elena felt it pressing down, making it hard to breathe. She reached under the table and found Dominic's hand, threading her fingers through his. Squeezed once. Support. Not agreement, not absolution, just the simple statement, "You're not alone." She felt him still completely. Then, slowly, his fingers tightened around hers. The conversation shifted, but the damage was done. The elephant they'd been avoiding had entered the room, even if no one named it directly. After dinner, James suggested brandy in the library. The board members declined. Clearly this was meant to be more intimate. Just James, Michael, Dominic, and Elena. "I'll be direct," James said once they were settled. "Your reputation precedes you, Castellane. You're brilliant and ruthless. You see value where others see failure, and you're not constrained by sentiment or loyalty." He swirled his brandy. "That made you very effective against me. It also makes you someone I'd be foolish to trust." "I understand." Dominic's posture remained relaxed, but Elena felt the tension thrumming through him. "You're wondering if I'll do to your current venture what I did to Hartwell Industries. Among other concerns." "I won't." The words were flat, certain. "What I did to your company was personal. This is business. I've spent 2 years building a portfolio of sustainable acquisitions. I'm looking for long-term value, not quick flips. What you're building, the technology, the infrastructure, that's a 10-year play minimum. I want in because I believe in it, not because I see an opportunity to destroy it." "Personal." Michael leaned forward. "You admit it was personal." "Michael." James began. "No." He should answer. Michael's voice cracked slightly. "He destroyed our family's legacy, crushed everything our sister." He stopped, breathing hard. Everything she cared about. And now he shows up with a new girlfriend like none of it happened. Like he's just some guy looking for a business deal. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Elena watched Dominic's face become a mask. Watched him retreat behind walls so thick nothing could penetrate. She thought about the rule: don't acknowledge Catherine, don't show sympathy, don't engage. But Michael was grieving. Still grieving? 3 years later, and she was sitting here, pretending that loss didn't matter. "I'm sorry for your loss," she heard herself say quietly. I can't imagine how difficult this is. Dominic's hand in hers went rigid. James Hartwell's eyes sharpened. You know about Catherine. Everyone knows about Catherine Hartwell. Elena kept her voice gentle. It was national news. I'm not going to pretend I don't know that Dominic was engaged to your daughter. That would be insulting to all of you. Elena. Dominic's voice held a warning she ignored. But I also know, she continued, that grief and business are separate things. That moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. And that whatever happened between your families, that's not mine to judge or understand. I'm just someone who's trying to know Dominic as he is now, not as he was then. The room held its breath. Then James Hartwell did something unexpected. He smiled just slightly, but genuine. That's the first honest thing anyone said all evening. He stood, moving to pour himself more brandy. Castellane, I'll give you this. If she's real, you've found someone with integrity. If she's not, well, you're an even better actor than I credited. Dominic stood as well, pulling Elena to her feet. His grip on her hand bordered on painful. She's real, he said, and we should go. Thank you for dinner. The goodbyes were quick and tense. Elena felt the evening collapsing around them, the carefully constructed fiction crumbling under the weight of truth. In the car, heading back to Manhattan, Dominic finally spoke. You broke the only rule I gave you. I know. Why? Elena looked at his profile in the darkness, the rigid jaw, the controlled breathing. The absolute stillness of someone holding back everything he felt. Because, she said quietly, pretending she never existed was making you less human, not more. They could see it. I could see it. You were performing, and they knew it. He turned to face her, and in the passing streetlights, she saw something raw flash across his features before he locked it down. I hired you to follow instructions. No, Elena said. You hired me to make them believe you're capable of human connection. Mission accomplished. James Hartwell just told you, I have integrity. That's not nothing. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed sharp and brief, but real. You're either the smartest person I've met or the most foolish. He released her hand finally, leaving her fingers cold. I haven't decided which. Neither had she. Dominic didn't speak again until they reached his building. Elena assumed he'd send her home mission accomplished or failed, depending on interpretation, but when the car stopped, he simply said, Come up. We need to discuss what happens next. Next? She followed him into the elevator, hyper-aware of the confined space. I thought tonight was the whole arrangement. So did I. The elevator required his keycard, his fingerprint. Security measures that felt excessive until she remembered who he was. What he was worth. Then you decided to improvise. The penthouse looked different at night, darker, more intimate. City lights poured through the windows, turning everything into shadows and suggestion. Dominic shrugged off his tuxedo jacket, loosened his bow tie, and Elena watched the transformation from controlled businessman to something raw. He poured 2 scotches without asking if she wanted one, handed her a crystal tumbler that probably cost more than her camera. James called while we were in the car, Dominic said, moving to the windows. He wants to meet again, tomorrow. Lunch, just the 3 of us. You, me, and him. Elena's stomach dropped. Why? Because you convinced him I might be genuine. He took a long drink. He wants to see if it holds up in daylight. If we're consistent. He stopped. If you're real. I thought you said 5 hours. One night. I did. Dominic turned to face her. In the dim light, with his hair slightly disheveled and his tie undone, he looked less intimidating, more tired, more human. I'm prepared to double your fee. 50,000 for tonight, 50,000 for tomorrow. After that, we're done. $100,000 total. The number made her dizzy. Or maybe that was the scotch, burning its way down her throat. Or maybe it was the way Dominic was looking at her like she'd become something he hadn't accounted for. You're asking me to keep lying to a grieving man, Elena said quietly. To his son. To keep participating in something that feels wrong. I'm asking you to finish what we started. Dominic's voice remained level. James Hartwell will recover. He's a businessman, he understands calculated moves. But he needs to believe I've changed before he'll risk trusting me. One more performance. That's all. Why does this deal matter so much? She set down her glass, kneading her hands free. You're already wealthy, already successful. What does this acquisition give you that you don't already have? Redemption. The word came out quiet but absolute. He crossed to a side table, extracted something from the drawer. When he returned, he held a photograph. Catherine Hartwell smiled up from the frame, blonde, beautiful, with her brother's eyes and her father's confident posture. Standing beside a younger version of Dominic, both of them sun-drenched and happy somewhere tropical. She believed I could build things instead of just destroying them, Dominic said, staring at the photograph. She saw the aggressive acquisition strategies as a phase, something I'd grow beyond once I proved I could compete with the old money families who'd always dismissed me. He paused. She was wrong. After she died, I became exactly what they feared. The destroyer. The corporate executioner with no mercy. Elena's throat tightened. So you took down her father's company. I dismantled it piece by piece. Sold the valuable parts. Dissolved the rest. Left James Hartwell with nothing but the memory of what he'd built. Dominic's jaw worked. People thought it was revenge that I blamed him for Catherine's death somehow, or that I wanted to hurt him for some perceived slight. But that wasn't it. Then what was it? He looked at her finally, and the raw pain in his eyes made her breath catch. Proof, he said. Proof that she was wrong about me. That I was exactly as ruthless and heartless as everyone said. That her faith in me was misplaced. He set the photograph down carefully. I destroyed the Hartwells because I needed them to hate me as much as I hated myself. The confession hung between them. Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't the script. This wasn't the performance they'd agreed on. Why are you telling me this? She whispered. Because you asked. Because you broke my rule tonight and somehow made everything work anyway. Because he dragged a hand through his hair. Because I'm tired of being the villain in my own story. James's new company represents everything Catherine wanted me to become. Sustainable growth, long-term thinking, building instead of destroying. If I can be part of that, maybe she wasn't completely wrong. Elena moved without thinking, crossing the space between them. Standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. Close enough to see the fine tremor in his hands. She wasn't wrong, Elena said. You're here. You're trying. That's not nothing. It's 3 years too late. Better late than never. She reached up, and in a moment of insanity, touched his face. Just her fingertips against his jaw, feeling stubble and warmth and the tension thrumming beneath his skin. You can't undo the past. But you can choose what comes next. Dominic's hand came up to catch her wrist. Not pulling her away, just holding her there, frozen in that moment of contact. His eyes searched her face, looking for something she wasn't sure she could give. This wasn't supposed to happen, he said roughly. What wasn't? This. You. His thumb pressed against her pulse point. You were supposed to be simple, a hired actress who took the money and disappeared. Instead, you're human? She meant it as a gentle joke, but it came out breathless. Dangerous. He pulled her hand away but didn't release it. Everything about this is becoming complicated, and I don't do complicated. I do transactions. Clear terms. No ambiguity. Then let's keep it simple. Elena's heart was racing now, but she kept her voice steady. One more performance tomorrow. Lunch with James. We show up, we're consistent, and then we're done. You get your redemption. I get my $100,000. Clean transaction. Nothing about this is clean. But he was still holding her hand, still standing too close. If we do this, if you commit to tomorrow, you need to understand something. James is smart. If he senses any doubt, any wavering in the story, he'll see through it. We'll have to be completely convincing. We were tonight. Tonight was dinner with witnesses. Tomorrow is 3 people in a restaurant. With nothing to hide behind. We'll need to be. He trailed off, searching for words. Intimate? Elena finished. We'll need to look like people who've been intimate. The word hung between them, loaded with implications. Neither of them wanted to examine too closely. Yes. Dominic's voice had gone rough. Can you do that? Can you sit across from a man whose family I destroyed and make him believe I'm capable of tenderness? Elena thought about the photograph of Catherine, about the raw pain in Dominic's voice when he spoke about his own guilt, about the careful walls he'd built and the way they were starting to crack. Yes, she said. But only if you can too. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe. The understanding that this wasn't one-sided, that the performance required both of them to be vulnerable. I haven't been tender in 3 years, he admitted quietly. I'm not sure I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena squeezed his hand once, then stepped back, needing distance before she did something irretrievably stupid. Text me the details for tomorrow. I'll be ready. She moved toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Elena. She turned. He stood silhouetted against the windows, looking more alone than anyone should in a penthouse worth millions. Thank you, he said. For tonight. He gestured vaguely, for not running. The night's not over yet, she said lightly. I might still run. But they both knew she wouldn't. In the Mercedes heading back to her apartment, Elena stared at her reflection in the dark window. The makeup was still perfect, the dress still beautiful, but underneath, she felt the dangerous shift happening inside her chest. This was supposed to be simple, a role, a well-paid performance with clear boundaries. Instead, she was starting to see Dominic Castellane as a person flawed and hurting, and desperate for something he couldn't name. She was starting to care whether he found his redemption. And that, she thought as Manhattan blurred past, was the most dangerous development of all. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that could only be him. Tomorrow. The Carlisle. 12:30. Dress casual, we're supposed to be comfortable with each other. Then, after a pause, another message. Get some sleep. And Elena, tonight wasn't a disaster, despite everything. She read the messages 3 times before responding with a simple, see you tomorrow. But sleep, when she finally crawled into her own bed in her tiny apartment, was impossible. She lay awake thinking about photographs and lies, grief and guilt, and the way Dominic's hand had trembled when he touched Catherine's picture. Somewhere in the penthouse across the city, she suspected he wasn't sleeping either. The Carlisle wasn't what Elena expected. She'd imagined something formal, white tablecloths and hushed tones. The kind of restaurant where wealth went to display itself. Instead, the Carlisle occupied a converted brownstone in the West Village, intimate and warm, with exposed brick and soft lighting that made everyone look softer. The kind of place where people brought dates they actually cared about. Elena arrived first, dressed in dark jeans and a cream silk blouse, casual but polished. She'd spent an hour on her makeup, trying to look naturally beautiful, rather than professionally painted. The effect was unsettling. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who might plausibly be falling for a billionaire. Miss Marsh. The hostess greeted her with practiced warmth. Mr. Castellane is already here. This way, please. He'd taken a corner booth that offered both privacy and a view of the room. When Elena approached, Dominic stood in old-fashioned courtesy that surprised her, and she saw he'd also dressed down. Dark jeans, a black sweater that probably cost what she made in a week, but still approachable, human. You look beautiful, he said, and the words sounded genuine enough to make her pulse skip. You look nervous, she replied, sliding into the booth beside him rather than across. Closer. More intimate. The performance starting before James even arrived. I am. He poured her water from the bottle on the table. James texted this morning. He's bringing Catherine's mother, Anne. Elena's stomach clenched. You didn't mention that. I didn't know. Dominic's jaw tightened. Anne hasn't spoken to me since the funeral. He stopped, recalibrated. This is her way of testing whether I'm sincere. If I can sit across from Catherine's mother and maintain this fiction, then James believes I've truly moved on. Or it's a trap, Elena said quietly. A way to force you to break. Maybe both. He leaned back, and the motion brought his shoulder against hers. Warmth radiated through the silk of her blouse. Either way, we're committed now. Are you ready? No. Absolutely not. But Elena nodded anyway. They arrived 10 minutes later, James in his customary suit, and beside him, a woman with silver blonde hair and Catherine's bone structure. Anne Hartwell moved with the careful grace of someone navigating grief in public, her smile polite but her eyes sharp. Dominic. She slid into the booth across from them, James beside her. You look well. Anne. Thank you for coming. Dominic's voice remained steady, but Elena felt him tense beside her. She found his hand under the table, threading her fingers through his. Anchoring him, Anne's gaze dropped to their joined hands, then back to Elena. You must be Elena. James told me about last night. He said you made quite an impression. I hope a good one. Elena kept her voice warm but not overeager. This is an unusual situation. I'm still navigating what it means. I imagine so. Anne accepted a menu from the waiter, not looking at Dominic. Dating someone with Dominic's history must be challenging. The word challenging carried layers of meaning. Elena felt Dominic's fingers tighten around hers. Everyone has history, Elena said carefully. The question is whether people can grow beyond it. Can they? Anne looked directly at Dominic now. Can someone who destroyed everything my daughter loved claim to have grown? The table went silent. James cleared his throat uncomfortably. Anne, he began. No, it's a fair question. Dominic's voice was controlled but not cold. Catherine believed I could be more than my worst instincts. I proved her wrong, spectacularly. After she died, I became exactly what she feared, someone who used power to hurt people. He paused. I can't undo that. I can't give you back what I took. All I can do is try to be different going forward. And you think bringing a new girlfriend to lunch with us proves you're different? Anne's voice cracked slightly. You think replacing Catherine is evidence of growth? I'm not replacing anyone. The words came out rougher than Dominic probably intended. No one could replace Catherine. Elena is. He looked at her. And something in his expression shifted. Elena is teaching me that moving forward doesn't require forgetting. That grief and guilt don't have to define every decision I make. That maybe I'm allowed to try again. Elena's throat tightened. He was supposed to be acting. This was supposed to be performance. But the emotion in his voice felt real enough to hurt. Try again at what? Anne pressed. Business? Love? Both? Being human, Dominic said quietly. The silence that followed felt heavy with ghosts. Elena watched Anne's face work through complicated emotions, anger, grief. Something that might have been sympathy. Catherine would have liked you, Anne said, finally, turning to Elena. She always believed people deserved second chances. Third chances. As many as it took. She dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. I'm not as forgiving as my daughter was. But I want to understand. Help me understand. Elena, why him? Why now? The question was genuine. Elena felt the weight of it, the impossibility of explaining something that didn't truly exist. Except somewhere along the way, between last night and this moment, the lies had started carrying threads of truth. Because he's trying, Elena said simply. Because underneath the reputation and the walls, I see someone who's tired of being the villain. Someone who wants to build something meaningful, instead of just accumulating wins. She looked at Dominic, letting herself feel the complicated tangle of emotions his proximity created. And because when I'm with him, I see glimpses of the man Catherine must have loved. The one worth believing in. Dominic went completely still beside her. That's either the truth, James said, or the best lie I've ever heard. Does it matter? Elena met his gaze. If the result is the same, if Dominic genuinely tries to be better, to build instead of destroy, does it matter what motivated the change? Yes, Anne said softly. Because motivation determines whether the change lasts. The waiter chose that moment to take their orders, giving everyone space to breathe. Elena used the interruption to study Anne Hartwell, seeing the exhaustion around her eyes, the careful way she held herself together. A mother still grieving her daughter. A woman forced to sit across from the man who'd loved Catherine and then dismantled everything she'd valued. The food arrived. Elena couldn't remember what she'd ordered and conversation shifted to safer topics. James discussed his new venture in careful terms, testing whether Dominic truly understood sustainable business practices. Dominic responded with intelligence and restraint, showing knowledge without showing off. And through it all, Elena played her role. She touched Dominic's arm when he spoke, laughed at his dry observations, let her hand rest against his thigh under the table, just resting there, casual intimacy that looked unconscious. But nothing about this felt unconscious. She was hyper-aware of every point of contact, every shared glance, every moment they sold the fiction of a relationship that didn't exist. Except it was starting to feel less fictional. I need to use the restroom, Anne announced as they finished eating. She looked at Elena. Will you join me? It wasn't a request. Elena glanced at Dominic, who gave her the smallest nod, then followed Anne through the restaurant. The bathroom was empty, elegantly appointed. Anne turned to face her, and the polite mask slipped slightly. I need you to be honest with me, Anne said. Woman to woman. No performance. Are you real? Is any of this real? Elena's heart hammered. This was at the moment she could end everything with the truth. Tell Anne about the business arrangement, the $50,000 per appearance, the carefully constructed fiction. She thought about Dominic holding Catherine's photograph, about the raw pain in his voice when he talked about guilt, about the way his hand had trembled against her wrist. I don't know, Elena said, and the honesty surprised her. We met in unusual circumstances. This is all very new. But what I told you at the table, that's true. I see someone trying to be better. Whether that's enough for something real to develop, I honestly can't say yet. Anne studied her face for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, sad but genuine. That's the most honest answer you could have given. She moved to wash her hands, and Elena saw her composure starting to crack. Catherine would have loved watching Dominic try to be normal. She always said he needed someone who wouldn't be impressed by the money or the power. Someone who'd call him on his bullshit. She sounds remarkable. She was. Anne's voice broke. And losing her broke something in him. I saw it at the funeral. The way he stood there, completely alone in a room full of people, looking like he'd been hollowed out. I hoped he might eventually heal. Instead, he channeled all that pain into destroying us. She turned to face Elena. So when James told me Dominic brought a date to dinner, I didn't believe it. I thought it was another manipulation. But now I'm not sure. Elena felt guilt twist in her stomach. Anne, whatever this is, real or performed, it's the first time in 3 years I've seen him show any emotion beyond calculation. That matters, even if it's fragile, even if it doesn't last. Anne touched Elena's arm gently. Just be careful. With yourself. Men like Dominic, men who've been that broken, they don't heal cleanly, and when they break again, they tend to take people with them. Back at the table, James and Dominic were deep in business discussion. When the women returned, Anne slid back into the booth with renewed composure. James, I think we should seriously consider Dominic's proposal, she said. And Elena felt Dominic tense in surprise beside her. Not because I've forgiven him, but because Catherine would have wanted us to judge him on what he does next, not what he's done before. James studied his wife, then Dominic, then Elena. You're sure? I'm sure that holding on to anger hasn't brought Catherine back. I'm sure that this company represents exactly what she wanted to build in the world. And I'm sure that if Dominic is genuine about changing, partnering with him might be better than refusing him. Anne's voice strengthened. But there will be conditions. Strict oversight. Board representation. And Dominic, if you hurt my family again, in business or otherwise, I will make the Hartwell Industries takedown look merciful. Are we clear? Crystal. Dominic's voice was rough with emotion he wasn't quite managing to hide. Thank you, Anne. For this. For even considering it. The lunch ended with handshakes and tentative plans for lawyers to begin discussions. Walking out into the afternoon sunshine, Elena felt untethered, like the performance had spun into something beyond her control. Dominic's hand found hers on the sidewalk. Held tight. He stopped, seeming unable to finish. Intense, Elena supplied. You were perfect. He turned to face her, and in the natural light, she could see exhaustion and relief and something more complicated in his eyes. Better than perfect. Anne trusted you. James believed you. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. You earned it, she said. By being honest. By trying. I need to. He stopped again, frustration crossing his features. This is where the transaction should end. I pay you. You disappear. We both move on. But? Elena felt her pulse quicken. But I don't want you to disappear. The confession came out quiet but certain. I want Elena, I want to know if any of this could be real. The sidewalk felt unsteady beneath her feet. Dominic, I know. I know this started as a business arrangement. I know I hired you to pretend. But somewhere between last night and now, pretending stopped feeling like pretending. And I need to know if you felt it too. Elena looked at him, truly looked at him, at the man who'd hired her to perform intimacy and then accidentally created actual intimacy. At the broken places he'd been trying to hide and the hope struggling to surface despite everything. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. We barely know each other. I know that too. His hand tightened around hers. But I know you see me, really see me. Not the reputation or the money or the carefully constructed image. And that's something I haven't had since Catherine. Maybe that's worth exploring. Maybe we're worth exploring. Elena's mind raced through the complications. The $100,000 already promised. The business relationship with the Hartwells that was built on their fiction. The grief and guilt that still haunted every decision he made. But underneath all that, she felt something simpler. The flutter in her chest when he looked at her. The way his vulnerability had cracked through her defenses. The sense that maybe, just maybe, they'd stumbled into something neither of them had expected. One date, she heard herself say. A real one. No performance, no audience, no $50,000 paycheck. Just us, figuring out if there's anything here beyond the act. Dominic's expression shifted, surprise, relief, something that looked almost like joy. When? He asked. Not today. Not while everything's still tangled up in business deals and grief. Give it time. Let the dust settle from the Hartwell meeting. Elena squeezed his hand once, then released it. If you still want to explore this in a few weeks, when the stakes aren't so impossibly high, call me. We'll start over. As actual people instead of actors. He looked like he wanted to argue, to push for immediate resolution. But then something in his expression softened. A few weeks, he agreed. To let everything settle. And Dominic? Elena stepped closer, rising on her toes to press a brief kiss to his cheek. For what it's worth, I wasn't completely acting either. Then she turned and walked away, leaving him standing on the sidewalk, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Behind her, she heard him call her name. But she didn't look back. Not yet. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Elena threw herself into work with manic intensity. She took every photography gig she could find, weddings, corporate events, family portraits. Anything to keep her mind occupied and her bank account recovering from the month of near poverty that had preceded Dominic's offer. The $100,000 had arrived in her account the morning after the Hartwell lunch. A wire transfer with no note, no message. Just the number, impossible and real, transforming her financial situation overnight. She'd sat staring at her account balance for 20 minutes, feeling something between gratitude and guilt. This money, this security had come from a performance. From lies wrapped around kernels of truth. Her phone buzzed constantly, those first few days. Texts from Dominic, how are you? The Hartwell deal is moving forward. I can't stop thinking about you. Is 3 weeks really necessary? Elena responded minimally, kindly but firmly. This distance mattered. They needed to separate the fiction from whatever might be real, and that required space. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she found herself reviewing the photos she'd taken at the gallery that first night. Dominic, moving through the crowd, isolated and controlled. She compared them to the mental images she'd stored from the Hartwell dinner, the way his mask had cracked. The vulnerability seeping through. He was changing, or maybe she was just seeing more clearly. On week 2, a package arrived. Elena opened it to find a vintage Leica camera, the kind she'd mentioned once, in passing conversation at the Carlisle, when James had asked about her photography. The camera she'd said represented everything beautiful about the medium, craftsmanship, precision, artistry. No note. Just the camera. Worth at least $15,000, sitting in its leather case like a promise. She should have returned it. Should have maintained boundaries. Instead, she loaded it with film and spent a Saturday wandering Central Park, relearning the tactile joy of manual focus and mechanical shutters. Every click reminded her of Dominic. Of the way he'd looked at her across the lunch table. Of his confession, I want to know if any of this could be real. You're distracted. Elena looked up from her coffee to find her best friend Maya studying her with knowing eyes. They'd met for Sunday brunch at their usual spot in Brooklyn, a tradition that had survived 5 years of Maya's corporate law career and Elena's photography hustle. I'm fine. You've stirred that coffee for 3 minutes without drinking it. You're not fine. You're troubled. Maya leaned forward. Is this about the mysterious benefactor? The one who suddenly fixed all your money problems? Elena had told Maya about a windfall from a big client. Not the whole truth, that felt too complicated to explain. Maybe. Details. Now. Maya signaled for more mimosas. I want to know everything about the man who can afford to pay you enough to stop stress-eating ramen. Against her better judgment, Elena found herself explaining the gallery, the proposition, the fake dates that had spiraled into something genuine. She left out Dominic's name, some instinct to protect his privacy, but shared everything else. Maya listened without interrupting, her lawyer's face revealing nothing. When Elena finished, Maya took a long drink of mimosa. So let me get this straight, she said finally. You got paid $100,000 to pretend to date a billionaire. During the fake relationship, real feelings developed. And now you're giving him space to figure out if the feelings are legitimate or just a side effect of the performance. Yes. Elena. Honey. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard. Or the most catastrophically stupid. I'm aware. Which do you think it is? Elena stared into her coffee. Both? Neither? I don't know anymore. Do you want it to be real? Maya's voice gentled. That's the question that matters. Not what he wants. Not what makes logical sense. What do you want? What did she want? Elena thought about Dominic's hand trembling when he touched Catherine's photograph. About Anne Hartwell's warning, men who've been that broken don't heal cleanly. About the dangerous, addictive feeling of being truly seen by someone who understood isolation. I want to know if I can trust what I felt. Elena said quietly. If it was real connection or just proximity and performance, and the thrill of inhabiting someone else's life for a night, then you need to give him the full 3 weeks. Create actual distance. See if the feelings survive without the intensity. Maya squeezed her hand. But Elena, be careful. Men with that kind of wealth and power, they're used to getting what they want. Make sure you're not just the next acquisition. The words echoed Anne's warning. Elena felt them settle uncomfortably in her chest. That night, alone in her apartment, she drafted and deleted a dozen texts to Dominic. Everything from I miss you too, this was a mistake too, can we just skip to the end? She sent none of them. Instead, she developed the film from the Leica, watching images emerge in the chemical bath. She saw Central Park through new eyes, the way light filtered through autumn leaves, the gestures of couples on benches, the solitary figure of a man feeding pigeons. Loneliness. Everywhere she looked. Even in the happiest scenes, there was isolation lurking at the edges. Her phone rang at 1:01 p.m. On day 16, Dominic. Elena stared at the screen for 5 rings before answering. Hi. His voice sounded rough, like he'd been arguing with himself about calling. I know it hasn't been 3 weeks. I know I'm supposed to wait. But I need to tell you something. Okay. The Hartwell deal closed today. James and I signed the partnership agreement. Anne was there. Even Michael shook my hand. He paused. I did it. I actually did it. Built something instead of destroying it. And the first person I wanted to tell was you. Elena felt her throat tighten. Dominic, that's incredible. It wouldn't have happened without you. Without, he stopped, and she heard him exhale slowly. Without you making me believe I could be something other than what I'd been. You gave me permission to try. You gave yourself permission. I just witnessed it. No. The word came out firm. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. That mattered. It still matters. Another pause. How many days until 3 weeks? 5. 5 days. I can wait 5 days. But he didn't hang up. Neither did she. What are you doing right now? Elena looked around her small apartment, the darkroom chemicals drying, the contact sheets scattered across her desk, the city lights visible through her single window. Thinking about you, she admitted. About whether what we felt was real or just a beautiful mistake. And what conclusion are you reaching? That I won't know until I see you again. In the real world, without scripts or performances or business deals hanging over us. She moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. 5 days, Dominic. Wait, the 5 days. And then? And then we find out if this survives sunlight. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Imagined him in his penthouse, alone among his millions of dollars and empty rooms. I'm not good at this, he said quietly. At being vulnerable. At admitting I want something I can't control or acquire. At risking rejection. Neither am I. But you're doing it anyway. So are you. Elena smiled despite the ache in her chest. That's what makes it brave. They talked for another hour about nothing important, her photography, his business, the weather, movies they'd seen. Normal conversation that felt extraordinary, because it was theirs. Untethered from performance. When they finally hung up, Elena felt both settled and unsettled. The feelings were surviving, growing, even. But Maya's warning and Anne's caution kept circling back. Be careful. Men who've been that broken don't heal cleanly. Day 18, a letter arrived. Actual paper, actual handwriting. Elena stared at the envelope for 5 minutes before opening it. Elena, I'm not good with words unless they're in contracts, but you deserve better than legal language. 3 years ago, I lost someone who believed I could be more than my worst instincts. I spent those 3 years proving her wrong, becoming exactly the monster everyone feared. I thought grief required that kind of darkness. That honoring Catherine meant staying broken. You didn't let me stay broken. You challenged every assumption I'd made about who I had to be, and somewhere between the performance and the truth, you showed me that moving forward isn't betrayal. That trying again isn't forgetting. I don't know if what we have is real or illusion. But I know I want to find out. I know that when I think about the future, really think about it, beyond the next deal or acquisition you're in it, laughing at my terrible art opinions, seeing through my carefully constructed walls, making me want to be the man Catherine believed in. 3 more days. I'm counting them. Dominic. Elena read the letter 5 times, then tucked it into her desk drawer, alongside the business card he'd given her that first night. Evidence of transformation, preserved on paper. She didn't respond. Not yet. Let him sit with the vulnerability. Let them both sit with it. But she counted the days too. Day 21 arrived with unseasonable warmth and crystalline autumn light. Elena changed outfits 4 times before settling on dark jeans, ankle boots, and a soft gray sweater, casual enough to feel authentic, polished enough to show effort. She left her hair loose, makeup minimal. This wasn't a performance. This was just her. Just Elena, meeting a man who'd seen her at her most calculating and her most genuine, and somehow wanted more of both. The plan was simple: meet at a coffee shop in the West Village at 2 p.m. Talk like normal people. See if the connection survived without wealth and pressure, and grief pressing down on everything. Elena arrived 10 minutes early, nerves making her restless. She ordered a cappuccino she didn't drink, found a table with a view of the door, and tried not to overthink what came next. Dominic walked in at exactly 2 p.m. He looked different. No suit, no power styling, just dark jeans and a navy Henley that made him look younger, more approachable. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. When his eyes found hers across the crowded cafe, Elena felt her breath catch. Same reaction, even without the performance, even in daylight, even when she'd been preparing for this, her body still responded to his presence, with that electric current of awareness. Hi. He slid into the chair across from her, and she noticed his hands were unsteady. Nervous. Dominic Castellan, master of hostile takeovers, nervous about a coffee date. Hi. Elena managed a small smile. You look terrified? He laughed shortly. Because I am. This is somehow more intimidating than negotiating billion-dollar deals. At least we're equally terrified. That's comforting, I think. He ordered an espresso from the passing waiter, then turned his full attention back to her. 3 weeks was too long. 3 weeks was necessary. I know. Doesn't mean I liked it. His expression softened. You're beautiful. I know I said that before, but I'm saying it again without an audience, without an agenda. Just you're beautiful. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Thank you. So are you. Men aren't beautiful. You are. She met his eyes directly. In an intimidating, slightly overwhelming, why is he interested in me kind of way. Because you're brilliant and genuine and you called me on my bullshit. Dominic leaned forward. Because you saw through the money and the power to whatever broken thing was underneath, and you didn't run. Because when you look at me, I don't feel like a corporate raider or a villain, or Catherine's failed redemption project. I just feel like me. The words hit Elena square in the chest. This was it. The moment where they stopped performing and started actually trying. I'm scared, she admitted. Of how fast this is moving. Of what it means that we met the way we did. Of whether this can ever be normal when it started so abnormally. Me too. He reached across the table, and Elena let him take her hand. His thumb traced patterns on her knuckles, gentle, tentative. But I'd like to try anyway, if you would. Define trying. Real dates. Honest conversations. Getting to know each other without scripts or $50,000 paychecks. Making mistakes. Being awkward. All the messy human things I've been avoiding. For 3 years. He paused. I can't promise it'll be easy. I'm still figuring out how to be a person again instead of just a function. But I want to figure it out with you. Elena felt something settle in her chest, not certainty, but willingness. The courage to risk this despite all the logical reasons not to. Okay, she said. Let's try. His smile was tentative but genuine. Yeah? Yeah. She squeezed his hand. But ground rules. We take this slow. We don't skip steps just because we technically already met each other's well. You met the Hartwells. The point is, we do this properly, no shortcuts. Agreed. Anything else? You have to tell me about Catherine, not today, necessarily. But eventually, I need to understand that part of you, who she was. What you lost. Why you can't let her go. Elena kept her voice gentle. I'm not asking to replace her. I'm asking to understand her. Dominic's expression tightened. But he nodded. Okay, eventually. And I need you to understand that I'm not impressed by wealth. The penthouse, the cars, the private jets, those don't mean anything to me. If we're going to do this, I need you without all the trappings, just the man underneath. The man underneath is still figuring out who he is. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena released his hand, leaning back. So, first real date, what do people do on first dates? Talk about their childhoods? Discover shared interests? Debate pineapple on pizza? Dominic's mouth quirked. I have no idea. I haven't been on a first date in over a decade. Me neither. Well, I've been on dates. They just didn't go anywhere. Elena wrapped her hands around her cold cappuccino. Tell me something real. Something you've never told anyone. He considered the question seriously. I'm terrified of being forgotten, he said finally. That when I die, the only thing anyone will remember is the companies I dismantled. The people I hurt. The money I made. That there will be nothing, no person, no legacy that says I was more than my worst actions. The confession hung between them. Elena felt its weight. Understood the courage it took to speak those words aloud. I'm terrified of being invisible, she offered in return. Of working my entire life to create something beautiful, through photography, and having no one ever really see it. See me. Of being one of those people who just disappears without making any mark on the world. You're not invisible. Dominic's voice was firm. I saw you immediately. 7 minutes of observation, remember? You couldn't be invisible if you tried. Neither could you. For better or worse, you're unforgettable. They talked for 3 hours. Coffee turned to tea turned to afternoon snacks as the cafe filled and emptied around them. Elena learned about Dominic's childhood, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs, watching wealthy classmates from the outside, building his empire from student loans and desperate determination. She told him about her parents' failed business, about learning to see beauty through a camera lens when real life felt too harsh to witness directly. No performance, no audience, just 2 people excavating their pasts and presenting the pieces carefully, seeing if they might fit together. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was setting, painting the West Village in golden light. They walked with no particular destination, Dominic's hand finding hers naturally. I want to show you something, he said, steering them toward a narrow street Elena had never noticed before. They stopped in front of a small storefront, a photography gallery, closed for the day. Through the window, Elena could see black and white prints hung with precision. Street photography, mostly. Moments of human connection captured in urban spaces. This was Catherine's, Dominic said quietly. She opened it 5 years ago. After she died, I couldn't bear to close it. I kept it running, funded it anonymously, maintained the space, curated shows from emerging photographers. He looked at Elena. I've never told anyone that. Everyone thinks I'm heartless enough to have dissolved, even this. But I couldn't. It was hers. Elena's eyes stung. She understood what he was showing her, not just the gallery, but the evidence that he'd never stopped loving Catherine. That grief hadn't hardened him completely. It's beautiful, she whispered. I want you to show here. The words came out rushed. Nervous. Your work. I've seen your portfolio online. You're talented. Really talented. This space, it needs someone who understands what Catherine was trying to build. Someone who sees people the way you do. Dominic. Not as a gift. As recognition. As the professional opportunity you deserve. He turned to face her fully. I know it's complicated. I know it's tied up in Catherine and grief and everything we're trying to navigate. But I've been thinking about this since I saw your photographs that first night. You belong here. Elena looked at the gallery, at the work displayed within, at the care evident in every detail. This was Catherine's legacy, and Dominic was offering to let Elena be part of it. On one condition, she said. You tell me about her, really tell me, who she was beyond the headlines and the tragedy. Let me understand what I'm stepping into. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. There's a bench. He pointed to a small park across the street. We could sit. I could try. They crossed to the bench, sat with space between them that felt both too much and too little. Dominic stared at the gallery, and Elena watched emotions play across his face, grief, love, regret, something that might have been peace. Catherine was fierce, he began. Everyone saw this blonde socialite and assumed she was decorative. But she was the smartest person I've ever met. She saw the world in systems and possibilities. She believed art could change people. That beauty mattered, even in brutal spaces. He paused. She believed I could build instead of destroy. That my talent for seeing value in failing companies could be redirected toward creation. She sounds remarkable. She was remarkable. She was also stubborn and idealistic, and sometimes infuriatingly naive about how business worked. We fought about my methods. She wanted me to be gentler, more ethical, more concerned with people than profit. His voice cracked slightly. I told her I would change. After we married, after I'd secured my position, I'd become the man she envisioned. But I needed the ruthlessness first, to prove I belonged. And then she died. Car accident. Black ice. She was driving to meet me for dinner. Dominic's hands clenched. I was late. If I'd been on time, she would have left earlier. Different roads, different timing, she'd still be alive. You can't know that. I know she'd be alive if she hadn't loved me. If she hadn't been trying to meet me for dinner. If I hadn't made her feel like she had to constantly accommodate my schedule, my business, my priorities. He looked at Elena finally, eyes bright with unshed tears. I killed her. Not directly, but through 1,000 small negligences. And then I killed her legacy by destroying her family's company. Elena felt her heart break for him, for the impossible weight he'd been carrying. Why did you really do it? She asked gently. Destroy Hartwell Industries. Because I needed to feel something other than grief. Because anger was easier than sadness. Because, he stopped, struggling. Because Catherine's death proved she was wrong about me. I wasn't capable of change. I was exactly the person I'd always been. And if I was going to be that person, I might as well commit to it completely. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Exactly. He wiped at his eyes roughly. And then you walked into that gallery, and you looked at me like I was a puzzle worth solving. And I thought maybe Catherine wasn't completely wrong. Maybe there's still time to become something else. Elena reached for his hand, held it tightly. She wasn't wrong, Elena said. You're here, you're trying. You kept her gallery alive even when everyone thought you'd destroy it. That's not nothing. It's not enough, maybe not. But it's a start. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling him tense and then relax into the contact. Thank you for telling me. For trusting me with this. They sat in the fading light, holding the complicated truth between them. Not resolving it, some things couldn't be resolved, but holding it together. Making space for grief and possibility to coexist. I'd like to take you to dinner, Dominic said eventually. Real dinner. Somewhere without business deals or family trauma. Just us, trying to be normal. Normal sounds perfect. They stood, and he pulled her close. Not a kiss, not yet, but a hug that felt more intimate than anything they'd shared before. Elena felt his heartbeat against her cheek, steady and real. Thank you, he whispered into her hair, for being patient, for not running, for believing I could be more than my worst actions. Thank you for letting me see you, she replied. When they finally pulled apart, something had shifted. The performance was over. Whatever came next would be genuine, messy and complicated and real. And Elena found she was ready for it. The photo appeared 3 days later on page 6. Elena was editing shots from a wedding when Maya called, her voice tight with concern. Have you seen the news? What news? Elena pulled up her browser, and her stomach dropped. Corporate Raiders' new romance, paid performance or real deal? There she was walking with Dominic outside the cafe, his hand in hers, both of them looking at each other with unmistakable intimacy. The caption was worse. Dominic Castellane, the billionaire infamous for destroying Hartwell Industries after his fiancée's death, has been spotted with photographer Elena Marsh. Sources close to the Hartwell family confirm Marsh was initially hired as a paid escort for business dinners. The question on everyone's mind, is this romance real, or just another calculated business move by Manhattan's most ruthless dealmaker? Oh God. Elena's hands shook as she scrolled through the article. They'd somehow obtained details about the initial arrangement, the $50,000 per appearance, the fake relationship, everything. Her phone exploded with texts. Unknown numbers requesting comment. Fellow photographers asking if it was true. And then, the one that made her stomach twist. Dominic, I'm so sorry. I'm handling this. Don't talk to anyone. She called him immediately. He answered on the first ring. Elena, how did they find out? Her voice came out sharper than intended. We were careful. No one knew except Victoria, and she stopped. Who knew about the money? My finance team processes the payments. Someone talked. His voice was tight with controlled fury. I'll find out who and destroy their career, but that doesn't fix the immediate problem. The immediate problem being that everyone now thinks I'm a prostitute you hired to rehabilitate your image. You're not Christ, Elena. You know that's not what this was. Do I? The words surprised her. But reading that article, seeing their relationship reduced to a transaction, something bitter had risen in her chest. Because from the outside, that's exactly what it looks like. Billionaire pays struggling photographer to pretend to date him. It's pretty clear-cut. Except it stopped being pretend. You know that. We both know that. Elena pressed her fingers against her temples. Do we, or did we just get caught up in the performance? Maybe the journalists are right. Maybe this was always a business arrangement that we dressed up as romance because it was easier than admitting we were being transactional. That's not fair. None of this is fair. She stood, pacing her small apartment. I'm getting calls from reporters. My clients are asking questions. Someone sent me an email asking if I'm available to accompany their husband to business dinners. Do you understand what this is doing to my reputation? Silence. Then, quietly, I never wanted this for you. But you knew it was possible. You knew that dating you, really dating you, would bring scrutiny. And you didn't warn me. Because I didn't think we'd be this public this fast. Because I thought, he stopped, regrouping. Because I was selfish. I wanted you, and I didn't let myself think about the consequences for you. I'm sorry. Elena felt her anger deflate slightly. What do we do now? I can release a statement. Confirm that we initially met through a business arrangement but that genuine feelings developed. Make it clear you're not, that this is real. 71. Is it? The question came out small. Is this real, Dominic? Or are we both so starved for connection that we convinced ourselves a paid performance became something more? Elena. His voice dropped, becoming raw. What I feel for you, that's not confusion. That's not loneliness dressed up as love. That's real. I know it's real because it terrifies me. Because I haven't felt anything this intense since Catherine, and that scares the hell out of me. But it's real. She wanted to believe him. God. She wanted to believe him. I need to think, she said, about whether I can handle this. The spotlight, the scrutiny, the constant questions about whether I'm with you for money or love. Take whatever time you need, but Elena, don't let tabloid garbage determine what we are. Don't give them that power. After they hung up, Elena stared at her phone as it continued buzzing with messages. She thought about her quiet life, her photography, the anonymity that had always protected her. All of it threatened now by association with Manhattan's most notorious billionaire. A text from Anne Hartwell surprised her. I saw the article. For what it's worth, I believe you're genuine. Tabloids make their living destroying things they don't understand. Don't let them destroy this. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Anne Hartwell, who had every reason to hate both of them, was offering support. Then another text, this one from Maya. Emergency brunch, now. I'm already ordering mimosas. Elena grabbed her jacket and headed out. She needed perspective. She needed her best friend to tell her whether she was being smart or cowardly, rational or self-sabotaging. Maya had commandeered their usual table and ordered enough food for 4 people. She stood when Elena approached, pulling her into a fierce hug. Okay, talk. Elena collapsed into the booth. I don't know if any of this is real. I don't know if I can handle being publicly examined like this. I don't know if I'm in love or just addicted to the intensity. 3 separate problems. Let's tackle them one at a time. Maya poured mimosas with the precision of someone managing a crisis. First, is it real? Forget the tabloids. Forget the money. When you're with him, what do you feel? Elena thought about Dominic's hand in hers, about the way he'd cried talking about Catherine, about the gallery and the Leica and the letter he'd written in his careful handwriting. I feel seen, she said quietly. I feel like he understands parts of me I didn't know needed understanding. I feel challenged and safe and terrified and hopeful all at once. That sounds pretty real to me. Or that sounds like the rush of something unsustainable, like infatuation disguised as connection. Elena? Maya's voice softened. You're scared. That's normal. But don't use the tabloid article as an excuse to run from something that might actually be good. It's not just the article. It's Elena struggled to articulate. It's that we started with a lie. That the foundation of this relationship is built on deception and money. How do you build something real on that? The same way people build real relationships after meeting drunk at bars or through lying on dating apps or via any of the other messy, imperfect ways humans connect. Maya reached across the table. The beginning doesn't matter as much as what you do next. The question is, do you want to keep building? Or are you looking for reasons to quit before you get hurt? The words hit too close. Elena had spent her life photographing other people's relationships from safe distance. She was an observer, not a participant. Getting involved, truly involved with someone as complicated as Dominic, meant risking the comfortable isolation she'd maintained for years. What if he breaks my heart? The admission came out whispered. Then he breaks your heart, and you survive it, and you take brilliant, devastating photographs about heartbreak. Maya squeezed her hand. But what if he doesn't? What if this is the real thing, and you run because it's scary? You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you missed. Elena's phone buzzed. Another text from Dominic. Whatever you decide, I understand. But I'm not giving up on this. On us. I'll wait as long as you need. Then, minutes later, I spoke to page 6, gave them a statement confirming that while our relationship began as a business arrangement, what developed is genuine and private. Threatened legal action if they continue harassing you. It should help. Elena showed Maya the messages. Her friend read them and smiled slightly. That's not the behavior of someone who sees you as a transaction. That's protection. That's caring. Or damage control? Stop looking for reasons to be cynical. Sometimes people are just good. Sometimes love is just love. Maya signaled for the check. But you need to make a decision. Either you're in, knowing it's complicated and public and scary. Or you're out, and you end it cleanly now before it gets harder. The middle ground, this half in, half out thing, that's not fair to either of you. Elena knew she was right. The uncertainty was becoming its own form of cruelty. That evening, she sat in her apartment with the contact sheets from the Leica scattered around her. Images from Central Park couples and solitary figures, connection and isolation, all the variations of human relationship captured in silver gelatin. She thought about Catherine, about the woman who'd believed Dominic could change, who'd loved him enough to push him toward better versions of himself. About the legacy she'd left in that gallery, waiting for someone to continue it. She thought about Dominic alone in his penthouse, surrounded by wealth but starving for genuine connection. About the way he'd trembled when talking about his fear of being forgotten. And she thought about herself, about the photographer who observed without participating. Who stayed safe behind the lens, to avoid the risk of being truly seen. Maya was right. She was looking for reasons to run, because staying meant vulnerability. Staying meant risking her heart with a man who was still learning how to be whole. But maybe that was okay. Maybe neither of them had to be perfect or completely healed. Maybe they just had to be willing to try. Elena picked up her phone and called Dominic. Hi. His voice was cautious. I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. I'm in, she said. I'm scared, and I'm probably making a terrible decision, but I'm in. Let's do this properly. Let's see where it goes. She heard his sharp intake of breath. Are you sure? No. But I'm sure I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay. Elena. But there are conditions. We take this slow. No skipping steps. You keep going to therapy. I assume you're in therapy? I will be. Starting this week. Good. And we maintain our separate lives. Our separate identities. I'm not becoming just Dominic Castellane's girlfriend. I'm a photographer who happens to be dating you. Agreed. Anything else? Yeah. Elena smiled despite her nerves. Take me on a real date. Somewhere normal people go. No helicopters, no private islands, no five-star restaurants. I want to see if we can be boring together. She heard him laugh, surprised and genuine. Boring. I can do boring. Friday night. You pick the place. But it has to be somewhere you'd take someone you actually liked, not someone you were trying to impress. Friday it is. His voice was warm with relief, and something that sounded like joy. Thank you. For being brave enough to stay. Thank you for being patient enough to wait. After they hung up, Elena felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty that might never come. But willingness. The courage to step forward into uncertainty. Outside her window, Manhattan glittered with possibility. Somewhere in that sprawling city, Dominic was probably staring at similar lights, feeling similar hope. They were doing this. Really doing this. And Elena found she was ready to see where it led. Friday came with the first real cold snap of autumn. Elena, dressed in layers, jeans, boots. A sweater that had seen better days but felt like comfort. If they were doing normal, she was committing fully. No performance, no pretense. Dominic texted at 5:30, pick you up at 6. Dress warm. We're going somewhere I used to love before I could afford better. Intrigued, Elena waited by her window until the Mercedes arrived, but when she got downstairs, Dominic was leaning against a beat-up Honda Civic that looked older than some of her camera equipment. What is this? She asked, laughing. This was my car in grad school. I've kept it in storage for 10 years. He opened the passenger door with a theatrical gesture. You wanted normal. This is as normal as I get. The interior smelled like old leather and memories. Elena buckled in, charmed despite herself. Where are we going? You'll see. They drove through Manhattan and out toward Brooklyn. Dominic navigated with the ease of someone who'd made this trip countless times, his hands relaxed on the wheel. No driver, no security. No buffer between them and the world. They ended up in Brighton Beach, parked outside a small Russian restaurant that looked like it had existed since the Cold War. I found this place when I was 22. Dominic said as they walked in. Broke, hungry, trying to figure out if business school was a terrible mistake. The owner Dimitri would let me wash dishes in exchange for meals sometimes. An elderly man looked up from the register, his face creasing into surprised delight. Dominic, my boy. He came around the counter, pulling Dominic into a crushing hug. 10 years. Where have you been? Building an empire, Dimitri. You know how it is. Dominic gestured to Elena. This is Elena. Elena, meet Dmitry Volkov, who kept me alive through my poorest years. Finally, a girlfriend. Dmitry beamed at Elena. I told him, stop working so much. Find a nice girl. Now you listen. He guided them to a corner booth. I bring you the good stuff. The stuff I don't serve to the tourists. As Dmitry bustled away, Elena studied Dominic across the worn table. He looked lighter here, younger somehow, like he'd shed the weight of his reputation at the door. You really wash dishes here? Dishes, floors, whatever Dmitry needed. Dominic's expression was nostalgic. I was so determined to prove I belonged in that world, the world of money and power. But I was also terrified I'd fail. This place. He gestured around. This was where I could be honest about struggling, where it was okay to be broke and scared. Food arrived in overwhelming quantities. Pelmeni, borscht, blini with caviar that was probably the most expensive thing in the building. Dmitry refused to let them order, simply bringing what he thought they should eat. He always did this, Dominic explained. Decided what I needed rather than asking what I wanted. Smart man, Elena said, tasting the pelmeni. They were perfect, simple and honest and exactly right. So when did you stop coming here? After my first major acquisition. I came back to show Dmitry I'd made it, tried to pay him for all those meals. He refused. Dominic's voice softened, said the payment was that I kept being a good man, that I didn't let success make me cruel. I didn't come back after that because you couldn't face him once you became what he warned against. Exactly. He looked down at his plate. And then tonight, bringing you here, I realized I've been avoiding everyone and everything that knew me before. Like if I could erase that version of myself, I could avoid accountability for what I became. Elena reached across the table, taking his hand. You don't get to erase the past. But you can choose what you do with it. Dmitry returned with vodka and 2 shot glasses. To new love, he declared, pouring generously. And to my boy, who finally comes home. They drank, the vodka burning pleasantly. Dmitry lingered, asking Elena about her work, her family, her intentions with his boy. She answered honestly, feeling accepted into something that predated wealth and reputation. As the evening progressed, Elena watched Dominic relax further. He told stories about his grad school days, the terrible apartments, the loan anxiety, the desperate ambition that drove him. He was funny, self-deprecating, human in ways she'd only glimpsed before. I want to show you something, he said as they finished eating. If you're willing to take a walk in the cold. They strolled along the Brighton beach boardwalk, ocean wind whipping around them. The beach was empty this time of year, just dark sand and darker water and the distant lights of Coney Island. Dominic led her to a bench that faced the ocean. I used to come here when I couldn't afford my heating bill. Sit and think about the future I was trying to build. Make promises to myself about what I'd do once I had power. What kind of promises? That I'd never be poor again. That I'd never be dismissed or overlooked. That I'd make everyone who'd underestimated me regret it. He stared at the dark water. Pretty much every promise was about revenge or validation. Nothing about happiness, nothing about connection. And now I'm sitting here with you, and I'm making different promises. He turned to face her, and in the dim boardwalk lighting, his eyes were serious. I promise to keep trying, to keep choosing healing over hurt, to keep showing up as honestly as I can, even when it's uncomfortable. Elena felt her throat tighten. Dominic, let me finish. He took both her hands. I can't promise I won't fail sometimes. I can't promise this will be easy or that the past won't keep haunting us. But I can promise that what I feel for you is real. That you've changed something fundamental in how I see the world. That when I imagine the future now, it includes you. I'm falling in love with you, Elena heard herself say. The words emerged unbidden but true. And it terrifies me because we haven't known each other long enough for this to be smart or rational or safe. I know. I'm falling too. Probably already fell. He pulled her closer. Is that okay? Can we be terrified together? Instead of answering, Elena kissed him. It was their first real kiss, nothing calculated or performed. Just the natural collision of two people who'd been circling each other for weeks. He tasted like vodka and possibility. His hands cupped her face gently, like she was something precious that might break. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dominic pressed his forehead to hers. I don't want to mess this up, he whispered. Then don't. She smiled against his lips. Just keep being honest. Keep showing me the person underneath all the armor. They kissed again, deeper this time. Elena felt years of isolation cracking open inside her chest, making room for something new. Something terrifying and necessary. The drive back to Manhattan was quiet but comfortable. Dominic's hand rested on her thigh, and Elena covered it with her own, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. Come upstairs, he said when they reached his building. Not a command, a question. An invitation. Elena knew what he was asking, knew the significance of that step, and knew, with sudden clarity, that she wanted this. Wanted him. Not the performance or the fantasy but the complicated, healing man who'd shared his past with her. Okay. The penthouse was dark except for city lights. Dominic led her to the windows, and they stood looking out at Manhattan's glittering expanse. I used to stand here and feel like I'd conquered something, he said quietly. Like this view was proof of my worth. Now I stand here with you, and I realize the view doesn't matter. It's just glass and distance. Elena turned in his arms. What matters? This, you. The fact that someone sees me and stays anyway. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, tender touches that felt like worship. Elena, I know. She silenced him with another kiss. I want it too. They moved to his bedroom slowly, stopping to kiss and touch and whisper. No urgency, just the gradual removal of barriers, clothing and fear, and the last pretenses between them. When they finally came together, it felt like inevitability. Like every moment since that first night at the gallery had been leading here. Dominic was gentle and reverent, treating her body like something sacred. And Elena gave herself over to sensation and connection, letting the walls she'd maintained for so long finally crumble. Afterward, lying tangled in expensive sheets with Dominic's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Elena felt simultaneously vulnerable and safe. This was real. They were real. And somehow, improbably, they'd built something genuine from a foundation of lies. I have to go to London next week, Dominic said into the darkness. Business meetings that I can't cancel. Come with me. Dominic, not as an employee, not as a performance, as my girlfriend, as someone I want to share experiences with. He ran his fingers through her hair. Show me London through your eyes, through your camera. Help me see it as something other than just another city with business opportunities. Elena thought about her schedule, the weddings she'd committed to, the gallery show she was planning. Then she thought about the life she'd been building in careful isolation, protecting herself from exactly this kind of risk. Okay, she said, I'll come to London. She felt him smile against her hair. Yeah? Yeah, but I pay for my own ticket. We might be doing this, but I'm not. I need to maintain some independence. I respect that. He pulled her closer. Though for the record, I'd happily pay for everything. Not because I think you can't afford it, but because I want to spoil you. Is that allowed? Sometimes. In moderation. When it doesn't feel like you're trying to buy me. Deal. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you. For tonight. For being willing to see the person I used to be. The person I'm trying to become. Thank you for showing me. Elena pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart, for letting me in. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, vulnerable and hoping, two broken people trying to heal together. Outside, Manhattan continued its restless glittering. Inside, for the first time in 3 years, Dominic Castellane slept without nightmares. And Elena dreamed of futures she'd never let herself imagine. London arrived gray and drizzling, perfect for photography. Elena stood at the window of their hotel room. Dominic had insisted on our room, separate beds if she wanted. But she'd climbed into his the first night without hesitation, watching rain blur the city into watercolor impressions. "We have an hour before the meeting," Dominic said behind her, emerging from the shower with wet hair, and that particular focused energy that meant he was mentally preparing for business. "Want to walk? Find you some interesting shots?" This had become their pattern over the past 4 days. He'd schedule business meetings, and she'd accompany him to London, exploring the city between appointments. They'd discovered they both loved walking without destination, finding unexpected beauty in mundane corners. "Let me grab my camera." Elena pulled the Leica from its case. She'd been shooting exclusively on film since London, loving the slowness, the intention required. They wandered through Shoreditch, Dominic in his business suit, Elena in jeans and boots with her camera strap across her body. She photographed graffiti and reflections, street vendors and architectural details. He watched her work, learning the rhythm of her observation. "You see everything," he said as she crouched to capture puddle reflections of a Victorian building. "Most people walk past 100 compositions without noticing. You see them all. It's my job to see." Elena stood, checking her settings. "Same way you see value in companies everyone else has written off. We're both looking for potential in overlooked places. Except I historically exploited that potential for profit. You create something beautiful. You're creating something beautiful now. The Hartwell partnership, that's not exploitation. That's genuine collaboration." She moved on, and he followed. "How did the meeting go this morning?" "Good. Better than good. We're launching a sustainable housing initiative using Catherine's gallery model but applied to development. Affordable spaces for artists and creative businesses in gentrifying neighborhoods." His voice carried cautious excitement. "It's everything she wanted me to do. Everything I told her I wasn't capable of." Elena lowered her camera. "She'd be proud of you. Maybe. Or maybe she'd point out that I'm 3 years too late." But he smiled slightly. "Still. Progress." They stopped for coffee at a tiny cafe that Dominic admitted he'd never normally enter. Too small, too unglamorous. But Elena loved it. Loved the worn wood and steamed mirrors and the barista who clearly recognized Dominic from the financial papers but treated him like any other customer. "I've been thinking," Elena said as they settled into a corner table, "about the gallery, Catherine's gallery." "What about it?" "I want to do a show. But not just my work, a group show. Emerging photographers who are seeing New York the way Catherine saw it. People who understand that beauty and struggle can coexist. That luxury and poverty, isolation and connection, it's all part of the same story." Dominic set down his coffee. "She would have loved that. What would you call it?" "Unseen New York." Elena pulled out her phone, showing him rough notes she'd been making. Photographers who work outside the traditional gallery system. People shooting their own neighborhoods, their own communities. Real perspectives instead of the sanitized version. Wealthy collectors usually buy. When? Spring? That gives me time to curate, to reach out to photographers, too. She stopped, seeing his expression. "What?" "Nothing. Just watching you talk about this, your whole face changes, you light up. It's beautiful." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're distracting me." "Good." He leaned across the table, kissing her quickly. "I like distracting you, but seriously, spring works. I'll make sure the gallery is available, whatever you need. I need you to trust me to run this my way. No interference, no business strategy, no trying to optimize for profit. Deal?" Though I reserve the right to be an enthusiastic attendee who brings all his wealthy friends and encourages them to actually buy the work, that's acceptable interference. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. "Victoria. The page 6 situation has flared up again. Someone's claiming we staged the Brighton Beach photos." Elena's stomach sank. "Did someone follow us?" "Apparently. There are photographs of us at Dimitri's, on the boardwalk. Speculation about whether it was a calculated PR move." He scrolled, jaw tightening. "They're calling it poverty tourism. Saying I'm using my past to seem relatable." Elena felt anger flash hot. "That's insulting to Dimitri. To you. To everyone who actually struggles with money, welcome to my life. Dominic pocketed his phone. Everything gets analyzed and twisted. Every genuine moment becomes potential evidence of manipulation. How do you live like this? I stopped caring what people thought years ago, mostly. But, he reached for her hand. I care that it affects you. That it makes your life harder. Elena thought about the messages she'd been receiving, some supportive, many critical, all invasive. About the way strangers now felt entitled to opinions about her choices, her relationship, her worth. I won't lie, it's hard, she admitted. But I'm learning that I care more about what's real between us than what strangers think about it. They'll create whatever narrative they want regardless of the truth. So we ignore them. We live our truth. Let them write their fiction. She squeezed his hand. Though maybe next time we want privacy, we check for photographers first. Noted. He stood, pulling her up. Come on. I want to show you something before my next meeting. They took the tube, Dominic's choice, to Elena's surprise, and ended up at a small park in Notting Hill. He led her to a specific bench, sat down, gestured for her to join him. Catherine and I came here, he said quietly. Our first trip to London together. We sat on this bench and talked about the future, what we'd build, what we'd become. She made me promise that no matter how successful I became, I'd stay connected to real people, real struggles, real life. And then you broke that promise. Spectacularly. He stared at the park, children playing, couples walking, the ordinary beauty of people living their lives. But sitting here now, with you, I feel like maybe I can make a new promise. Keep this one. What kind of promise? To keep choosing healing. To keep building instead of destroying. To keep letting you see me, even when it's uncomfortable. He turned to face her. Elena, I know this is fast. I know we're still figuring this out. But I need you to know you're not a rebound or a replacement or a redemption project. You're the person who helped me remember how to be human. And I'm in love with you. Completely, irrationally, all in love with you. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. Even though you're complicated and sometimes impossible and come with an entire security detail I didn't ask for. To be fair, the security detail is non-negotiable. People are insane. I've noticed. She kissed him, soft and certain. But I'm choosing you anyway. Choosing us. Whatever that looks like going forward. Even if it means more tabloid coverage. More scrutiny, more strangers having opinions about your choices. Even then. Because what we have, what we're building, that's worth defending. Worth fighting for. She rested her head on his shoulder. Besides, I photograph reality for a living. I understand that the beautiful moments and the difficult ones coexist. That's not a flaw, that's just life. They sat in the grey London afternoon, holding each other while the city moved around them. Elena thought about the impossible path that had led here, from a chance encounter at a gallery to a fake relationship to something startlingly, beautifully real. Her phone buzzed. A text from Anne Hartwell. I saw the latest tabloid nonsense. Ignore them. I've watched you two together. Whatever you started as, you're real now. That's what matters. Elena showed Dominic the message. He read it, and something eased in his expression. She's right, he said. We're real now. Everything else is just noise. 3 months later, the opening night of Unseen New York drew a crowd that surprised even Elena. She stood in Catherine's gallery, her gallery now, in a way, though she'd never quite think of it as hers alone, watching people engage with photographs that showed the city's hidden beauty. Street vendors and subway musicians, rooftop gardens and forgotten neighborhoods. The faces of people who made Manhattan work but rarely got photographed for magazine spreads. Dominic stood across the room, talking to James and Anne Hartwell. He caught her eye and smiled, not the controlled expression from that first gallery, but something warm and genuine and entirely for her. You did it. Maya appeared beside her, champagne in hand. This is incredible. Really, truly incredible. We did it, Elena corrected. Every photographer in this show, every person who trusted me with their vision. This is collaborative. Very diplomatic. But also, your boyfriend is looking at you like you hung the moon. Just so you know. Elena laughed. He's biased. He's in love. There's a difference. Maya clinched her glass against Elena's. I'm proud of you, for taking the risk. For not running when things got complicated. I'm proud of me too. Elena surveyed the gallery, the work on display, the conversations happening between artists and collectors. This is what Catherine wanted. Not just beautiful art that challenges perspective. Art that makes people see their city differently. Dominic materialized beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. Anne wants to fund an expansion. Create satellite galleries in other cities using this model. She asked if you'd be interested in curating. Really? Really, you've created something special here. Something worth replicating. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm not surprised. I knew you would, the moment I saw you photographing that first gallery. Elena leaned into him, feeling grateful and overwhelmed and impossibly lucky. This path from hired actress to genuine partner, from observer to participant, from safety to risk had transformed everything. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me, for waiting, for being brave enough to try again. Thank you for making trying feel possible. Dominic tightened his arm around her. For teaching me that moving forward doesn't require forgetting. That healing can coexist with grief. That love can happen more than once. Across the gallery, Elena saw a photograph she'd taken months ago. Dominic, at that first gallery, isolated in the crowd. She'd hung it beside a recent photograph, the two of them on the Brighton Beach boardwalk, laughing at something Dimitri had said during their most recent visit. Before and after. Isolation and connection. The transformation visible in silver gelatin. What are you thinking? Dominic asked. That were proof photographs can lie, Elena said. That first picture made you look untouchable. Unreachable. But you were just waiting for someone to see through the performance. And you were waiting to be seen. We were both waiting. Just didn't know it yet. The gallery hummed with conversation and possibility. Outside, Manhattan glittered with the same indifferent beauty it always had. But inside, in this space built by one woman's vision and continued through another's determination, something real was taking root. Elena raised her champagne. To Catherine, for believing people could change, for creating spaces where transformation was possible. To Catherine, Dominic echoed. And to you. For proving she was right. They drank together, surrounded by art and community and the messy, beautiful reality they'd built from lies and grief and the courage to try again. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes about money, about boundaries, about the persistent tabloid attention. Elena still struggled with the scrutiny that came with dating someone famous. Dominic still had nightmares about Catherine, still carried guilt he might never fully release. But they were building something real. Something that honored the past while choosing the future. Something that proved healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about making space for new growth, alongside old scars. Elena looked at Dominic, really looked at him, the way she had that first night through her camera lens. But now she saw something different. Not isolation, but connection. Not performance, but authenticity. Not a man pretending to be human, but a man who'd finally remembered how. I love you, she said, simple and true. I love you too. He kissed her, oblivious to the gallery crowd, to the art on the walls, to everything except the woman in his arms. Thank you for saying yes, for pretending, first, and then for making it real. Best $100,000 I ever earned, Elena joked. Best investment I ever made, he countered. And in that moment, surrounded by photographs of unseen New York, standing in the gallery of a woman who'd believed in second chances, holding the man who'd taught her that risk could lead to something beautiful, Elena Marsh felt completely, impossibly seen. Not through a camera lens. Not through performance or pretense. Just seen. Just loved. Just real. And that, she thought as Dominic pulled her closer and the gallery hummed with life around them, was worth every terrifying moment it had taken to get here.